Hello and welcome. I don't know about you, but enough's enough. The recent VAT raid on independent schools I didn't agree with. I don't have a problem with people paying for education. Can you blame people for paying for education if they can afford it? And a lot of people, by the way, couldn't afford it, but they put their kids there anyway and scrimped and saved. I do agree that we need to inject a huge amount of resource into state education to lift it up to be as good as the good independents. But to turn children's lives upside down the way that they have, thousands of children, thousands of families suffering now, and also therefore to put a load on the state in terms of education, seemed to me to be at best dumb. However, I could kind of understand the logic, and some people think that's a good way of doing things. And so, all right, we're allowed to have differing opinions, but the fact that the money has not gone anywhere near education, but apparently it's gone into housing, and some people say to house immigrants, and some people say illegal immigrants. I don't know about that, but in of itself, the fact that it's gone to housing when we were told otherwise is that's it. Keir Starmer has got to go. Labour, you have got to get your act together quickly. This is ridiculous. And I want to talk you through some of my thinking around this. To begin then, let's look at the Dunning-Krueger effect. You'll see here it says, and this is by the way is from Wikipedia, a cognitive bias in which people with limited competence in a particular domain overestimate their abilities. And here in popular culture, the Dunning-Krueger effect is often misunderstood as a claim about general overconfidence of people with low intelligence instead of specific overconfidence of people unskilled in a particular task. And that's exactly it. Keir Starmer obviously has some type of intellect. He can pass legal exams, he can pass judgments, but this overconfidence in his ability to do the job of PM, I think, is one of the reasons that we are in big trouble. He's taken his portfolio of skills and transferred them to the leader of the opposition initially. Again, strange chameleon-like creature who never seemed to stand for anything, at least for more than 5 minutes. A lot of people felt dread, that's what I've seen in some of the comments to my videos, and misgivings. And so then when he gets into power, well, unfortunately, the spider sense of a lot of people in the population was correct. It was justified. And since getting into power, he has shown again and again and again, it's not just him, but we have to put the focus on him because he heads up the party. He heads up the country in terms of the main political actor. And he's shown just not to be up to the job. So let's go further with this. Have a look at this. Dunning-Krueger effect. This is a graphic from the web. Peak of Mount Stupid. So this is someone coming in. I mean, it's a fairly, I suppose, cheeky title, but is it wrong in terms of Keir? So they come into a role, they overestimate their ability to do it, and I'll explain one of the reasons why I think that is the case in terms of Keir. And so they're feeling great. They're overly confident, but their competence just isn't there. So it's called the peak of Mount Stupid. And then they realise they have no idea what they're doing, and they dip into the valley of despair. And then gradually through work and through just doing things by rote and time, they eventually begin to get better until they are on this plateau of sustainability. They can do the job repeatedly at a reasonably competent level. So that's one way to look at Dunning-Krueger. This, by the way, is not what I think has happened to Keir Starmer. I mean, we've experienced this, but that's not what he's seeing. We've seen the peak of Mount Stupid, but it's us that are in despair. You get my point. And we don't seem to be climbing anywhere towards the peak of sustainability in terms of competent behaviour. So, before we look at a different way to consider Dunning-Krueger, let's look at here to this paper, and it is about a two-part study on the Dunning-Krueger effect at SIUC, University's aviation students. The Dunning-Krueger effect indicates that individuals with lower skill or knowledge levels have unrealistic positive images of their capabilities compared to their peers. So, not stupid, but they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge. Results indicate that the Dunning-Krueger effect is present in SIUC aviation students. Students scoring lower on both a grammar test and a pilot knowledge test grossly overestimated their ability, while higher scoring students underestimated their ability. And I would suggest this. I would suggest that we have got a lot of people around, not a lot of people, but a handful of people who are high scoring in their ability to do that PM job, to lead the country. But they're worried, they're trepidatious, they don't want to come forward. Or maybe they're a little bit frightened for all sorts of reasons. I mean, we've heard whispers about how ruthless a certain individual is, but in that mix, I believe some people are saying, I couldn't do it. Whilst we have someone in power, in charge, who is continuing to overestimate how wonderful they actually are. And it's dangerous in aviation, and it sure as heck is dangerous in terms of politics, particularly when you're meant to be leading a country. Let's look at Dunning-Krueger a different way. So this line here, you will see, is confidence level. And this line here is actual competence. So what's meant to happen is that we start with low competence and gradually we get better and better and better. We start, again, the green line being overly confident, and then we have a dip when we realise, hold on a second, I'm not competent. And then we have this crossover here, or the point I should say, where the two lines touch. And then, of course, we get this increase in confidence and increase in competence. That's what's meant to happen. But here's what I think has happened. Keir Starmer is still up here. He's still there. There is no climb in competence at all. It is flatlining, like many things in the country. A well of despair, one could argue. So we are in despair here, flatlining along there. Keir is still here, full of confidence as he looks around and gazes on his kingdom from the summit of Mount Stupid. And then, let's go here. Back to the subject in hand. Starmer accused of using private school VAT raid to house illegal immigrants, from the Telegraph. Again, allegedly. And then from the Mail, Keir Starmer accused of misleading the public over private school VAT, has been accused of misleading the public over his tax raid on private schools after suggesting it will be used to fund homes, not teachers. He wrote, and I believe this was actually on X, in my budget last year, my government made the tough but fair decision to apply VAT to private schools. Everything's tough, isn't it? But they still managed to make these tough decisions and don't really seem to be that bothered about these tough decisions. A tough decision. I don't think it was tough at all for you. The Tories opposed it. Reform opposed it. Today, because of that choice, we have announced the largest investment in affordable housing in a generation. That is not what he said. That is not where the money was meant to go. So either we're seeing the messaging getting totally skewed, in which case that's incompetence in of itself, and or we're seeing a party and a leader who are literally out of control. And this from the Mail. I quote this because I thought it was quite well written. We are in the worst case scenario, one that we have warned about since the introduction of this policy. Real damage has been done to independent education without any benefit to state schools, who are also facing further cuts. It is children who will lose out as a result. This is my point. These children have suffered. And what was it Bridget Phillipson wrote some time back about the independent schools? That something along the lines, and I'm going to paraphrase here, they'll have to do without their embossed writing paper, something like that, because our school buildings are failing, or the roofs are failing, or whatever it was. Again, I'm paraphrasing. And to a degree, I get the sentiment of that to a degree, but there's something angry and chip on the shoulder like and bitter about the language there. There's something wrong with it. It is not about, as I've suggested, destroying the lives of children and their education and putting more weight on the state sector. It is about pulling everyone up to that point, to that level of, not every independent school, of course, but to have access to better education. Then, a spokesman for parent group Education Not Taxation said Labour's plan to fund housing with school fee VAT shows that this was never about improving education in state schools, but about punishing families who dared to send their child to an independent school. And you gotta wonder, haven't you? I can't say that that's what it was about, but when you look at it from certain angles, it looks like that's what it was about. So instead of lifting everyone up, the usual nonsense when the wrong people in the left get in positions of power and influence, we just trash everything. It just turns to rubbish. It's horrible, but it's an equal level of horrible, so that's okay. Well, I don't think it is okay. Not at all. Let's get on to Pest. I'm calling Keir a pest, because I think he is a pest. He's a pest, generally speaking, but also you may have spotted that this is perhaps some kind of acronym. And I'm going to describe some of his features and why I think he is unsuitable and why I think him presiding over this debacle with the VAT being siphoned, despite what was said, into housing, why that is, that's happening. Because there's an underpinning here to this character, Keir Starmer, or Sir Keir Dunning-Krueger. The P is for petulant. Now let's look at what a dictionary says about petulant. Unreasonably irritable or ill-tempered. Peevish, isn't he? Doesn't like to be challenged. Thin-skinned, bit prickly. And then here, contemptuous in speech or behaviour. And he is, unless you're somebody like Donald Trump, unless he's trying to impress, unless he's socially climbing. But everyone else, this imperious demeanour, well, who the heck are you? You know, the guy in the pub in Bath. I don't need lectures from the likes of you. I mean, he's used that line before. Doesn't need lectures from Reform. No, because you're beneath me. Oh, Donald. Oh, no, you, well, I need you, so the demeanour changes. But we have someone who's petulant. And I think it shows up in facial expressions, shows up in the way he behaves and interacts, or not, as the case may be, with the country. So, contemptuous in speech or behaviour, shows contempt of others. Then the E, emotional intelligence deficit. I've alluded to this before. This individual has been promoted above his emotional intelligence level. And emotional intelligence is made up of different things, but one of the things it's made up of is empathy. And I think we're seeing someone who seems to lack it. Really seems to lack it. Now, I think there are others in the party, the Labour Party, who are problematic, but I believe they have empathy with some. But a strangely, oddly skewed perspective on what a free market and capitalism is about, and almost a hatred, or perhaps it is a hatred, it comes across like that, of those who might have more. Ironically, when quite a few in the Labour Party have more than most, but never mind, let's not let facts get in the way of ideology. However, in terms of Keir, this lack of empathy, whether that's real or not, appears to be rife in terms of his thinking, his interactions with those who he feels perhaps imperious towards. Or is it contempt? A lack of empathy. What a heck of a thing to have in a leader. Anyway, the S for stubborn. Are narcissists stubborn? Now, I'm not saying that Keir Starmer is a narcissist. I know that quite a few people, and I've mentioned this before, suggest that he exhibits traits of narcissism. I'm not saying this is narcissistic personality disorder, but he seems to, at times, judging by what he says and does and how he says and does it, look to be a little bit further along the narcissistic spectrum than, the average person. So it says here, are narcissists stubborn? Absolutely. Their stubbornness stems from a need for control and an inflated sense of self. Do you pick that up from Keir? Do you get that? An inflated sense of self? And then, in this article, we explore the roots of this behaviour, its impact on relationships and strategies for dealing with it. Well, we're not going to explore that article because we know what the impact is on relationships. The relationship that we used to have with the Labour Party, or some of us did. The relationship that we used to have with some politicians. It's now all being tarnished. That relationship has been strained and actually broken. Trust has gone, as I've said before. And then, how to deal with it? We don't need to look at the article for that either. How to deal with it is Keir needs to, with the help of the Labour Party, step aside and get someone else in. It is mistake after misstep after stubborn, petulance, imperious behaviour. There is no connection to him that I can see between his office and the population. And you need at least some connection, particularly during these interesting times. So the S is for stubborn. What could the T be? Well, tyrannical. Yes, I'm calling him tyrannical. He's authoritarian for sure, but tyrannical, well, let's look at what it says. Using power over people in a way that is cruel and unfair. Now, consider what you've seen over the last few months. Cruel and unfair. How many times have you felt, have others felt, and people have said that things are unfair? That's unfair. I think what happened to the farmers was unfair. I think what happened to the waspy women was unfair. I think what happened to businesses when they were, given to believe otherwise in terms of national insurance contributions was unfair. The list does go on. And I also thought what happened to the pensioners was unfair, but it is also cruel. And you could argue that there's cruelness in those other decisions as well. And I think what happened to those children was cruel in those independent schools. And that will go on. To what end? Did it help anyone in education at all? So if these articles are correct, if what we're reading is correct, then not only is this a shambles, not only is it outrageous, but it is a point of no return. I've said this before. He's crossed the Rubicon. We all have together because we're beyond the point of no return. So, Labour, I know some people in that party watch some of these videos. I ask you to do something about this. Remember that Dunning Krueger thing? Whilst Keir stands atop Mount Stupid and surveys his kingdom, which is crumbling and turning into just rubble and dust before his eyes, but not connected to it, not emotionally connected to it whatsoever, basking in his own munificence, a legend in his own lunchtime. Whilst he's doing that, you're standing there going, oh, could I do that job? I'm not sure. Well, that's good. Self-reflection and a bit of doubt is good. Not to the point where it freezes you into inaction, but if you've got doubt, you can listen, you can reflect, you can find ways to do better next time. You can learn by your mistakes, you can admit your mistakes, you can be humble, you can be there and serve this country, which is what the PM and the party in charge are meant to do. So, over to you. What are you going to do? Sir Keir Dunning-Krueger needs to go. He can stay up Mount Stupid and enjoy himself there. But for the rest of us, we've got to get out of this valley of despair.